All right, let's jump right in. We're looking at what is absolutely one of the biggest social and economic transformations in modern history. I mean, it's this massive story of demographics, economics, and just raw human ambition. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a monumental shift that is happening right this very second: the rise of India's middle class. For decades, the global narrative around India was pretty much focused on its status as a developing nation. It was seen as a place where millions struggled with widespread poverty and faced really limited opportunities. But wow, over the last 30 years, a completely new force has emerged. Today, we're talking about hundreds of millions of Indians who now have access to better education, smartphones, reliable internet, and modern banking. They're buying consumer goods and accessing healthcare that previous generations could literally only dream of. Honestly, it's a staggering leap. But a shift this massive doesn't just happen overnight, right? It needs a spark. So you kind of have to wonder, how did this whole transformation actually begin? Where did this incredible new middle class come from? Well, to understand that, we need to rewind the clock and travel back just over 3 decades. Which brings us to part one, the catalyst, specifically the 1991 crisis. Picture this, it's 1991 and India is not booming. Actually, scratch that. It was practically on the brink. Economic growth was grinding to an absolute halt, and that caused the country's foreign exchange reserves to drop to dangerously low levels. They were, for all intents and purposes, running on empty. Facing the immediate, terrifying threat of a total financial collapse, survival meant taking drastic action. The government was forced to introduce some major, sweeping economic reforms. To save the economy, the government had to open up the markets. They actively encouraged foreign investment to start flowing in, and this is absolutely crucial. Private businesses were finally given the freedom they needed to actually grow and operate without suffocating restrictions. These reforms were like unlocking a massive door for the country's economic potential. Suddenly, you had new industries popping up everywhere, manufacturing ramped up, and millions of brand new jobs were created. And here's the really cool part. Those big macro-level reforms, they quickly trickle down to the micro level, straight to the dining room tables of everyday citizens. As industries boomed, incomes naturally went up. Families started moving out of poverty and into much more stable economic positions. That right there was the direct result of 1991, the birth of India's modern middle class. But look, just getting out of poverty was only step one. To build the massive middle class we see today, India needed an engine. So let's talk about part two, the IT engine. You really can't talk about this transformation without talking about the IT revolution. It played an absolutely crucial role. Cities like Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Pune, and Gurgaon completely transformed. I mean, they didn't just grow, they exploded into these massive, globally recognized technology hubs. Almost overnight, young engineers and software professionals were finding high-paying opportunities. And not just locally, but with companies all over the world. And it's fascinating to see how that tech boom rippled out to create a broader middle class. It's basically a giant chain reaction. As these IT hubs expanded and pulled in all this global capital, salaries skyrocketed for young professionals. But the real game changer was the explosive demand that came right after. All these newly affluent workers, well, they needed places to live, so housing boomed. They wanted better schools, so education expanded. They bought cars and scooters, so transportation grew. It triggered massive growth across completely different sectors of the economy. If the IT boom was the engine, what came next was basically the nitro boost. Moving right along to part three, the digital multiplier. Digital technology took this transformation and just accelerated it at a breathtaking pace. We're talking affordable smartphones and low-cost internet that weren't just nice-to-haves. They literally connected millions of people to the modern economy almost overnight. Then enter digital payments. That completely revolutionized the landscape by bringing real financial services to millions of people who hadn't even used a bank before. Throw online platforms into the mix, and suddenly, a small business owner can reach customers way beyond their local town, and students can access remote education from pretty much anywhere. This digital multiplier just rapidly scaled the middle class to unprecedented numbers. Now, if you only take one thing away from this explainer, make it this. The true growth of India's middle class is not just about the money. It's about aspirations. We're witnessing a fundamental shift in mindset. Families are investing way more in their kids' education. Young professionals aren't just looking for a safe, stable job anymore. They're actively going out and starting their own businesses. Consumers are demanding better products, higher quality services. People are traveling more, spending more, and just participating way more actively in the global economy. But okay, to really get the whole picture here, we need to keep things grounded. Let's do part 4, the reality check. Because look, despite all this incredible growth, there are still some very serious challenges. Income inequality continues to be a very real, pressing issue across the nation. Plus, a huge chunk of the population is still employed in the informal sector, meaning they don't have strong job security or benefits. And while things are definitely improving, access to top-notch healthcare and education is still pretty uneven depending on where you live. Finally, because India's population is so young, there's this constant, urgent need to create jobs. The economy has to keep expanding just to provide opportunities for the millions of new workers entering the market every single year. So yeah, this massive transformation is very much still a work in progress. But even with those hurdles, the momentum is just undeniable. India's middle class is growing, and that brings an incredible amount of economic power. Which brings us to our final section, part 5, reshaping the global economy. The data paints a picture of the future that is just staggering. Over the next 2 decades, India could become one of the world's largest consumer markets. Let that sink in for a second. The sheer spending power of this newly empowered demographic, it's going to totally dictate global business. It's going to drive global technology development and heavily steer where investment money goes. Companies all over the planet are looking at these exact demographics right now and completely altering their long-term strategies just to meet the demands of the Indian middle class. At the end of the day, the story of India's middle class is really a story about opportunity. It's about millions of families waking up and striving every single day for a better future. And the craziest part? The story is still actively being written right now. It is, without a doubt, one of the most important economic shifts of the 21st century because as this middle class continues to rise, the future of India is rising right along with it. We've seen where it started, the tech that accelerated it, and the sheer scale of its global impact. So I'll leave you with this. As these millions of new consumers, innovators, and workers step out onto the global stage, how will India's rising middle class reshape your world? Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.